Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the second Perludem regional discussion. So this discussion series is a program of the Asia Pacific regional support for election and political transition in brief respect with Perludem, Association for Election and Democracy based in Jakarta. Today's discussion is also supported by International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance International Idea. Thank you for joining us, everyone. My name is Mahardika, the Program Officer for Perludem. It is an honor for me to be able to moderate today's discussion with the topic strengthening voters' role in election amid pandemic. Before we start, I would like to invite Teresia Joyce as Respect's Chief of Party to open the discussion and give a bit context of this discussion as a Respect Perludem programs. Mbak Joyce, floor is yours.
The microphone still off, Mbak Joyce. Mbak Joyce.
Test?
Yeah, okay. We can hear
you. We can.
Yes. Okay, sorry. Yes, thank you. Good day, everyone. Welcome to our regional virtual event. I would like to start by wishing you and your families my personal best for your health and safety during this time. Thank you all for taking time to join the discussion. We are now in the Zoom meeting room to talk about strengthening voters' role in elections amid pandemic. And here already with us, Adi Aman, Senior Program Manager of International IDEA, Chandani Watawala, Executive Director of ANFRAL, Seye Kwaswarmin, Executive Director of People's Alliance for Credible Elections or PACE, Myanmar, and also Hoirinisa Nur Agustiati, Deputy Director of Perludem. Thank you and much appreciated to all speakers and Mahardika to respond to our invitation. We are grateful that we will able to discuss this topic with you and hope to learn more from the speakers about international and regional experiences and analysis on how to ensure people's political rights, including women and people with disabilities. Meanwhile, how to protect and to save them from the COVID-19 during the elections. This topic is about us, again, about how we will use our political rights during the elections, particularly elections during the pandemic of COVID-19. We know that the COVID outbreak has affected mostly all areas of public and private life all over the world. This outbreak has a significant impact on our democracies. Elections are not an exception. State authorities considered either delay and reschedule the initially planned elections or consider alternative processes and procedures to protect all voters and election management bodies members from spreading the virus during the election cycle. This discussion is part of Perludem, or the Association for Elections and Democracy Regional Program, with Ibu Titi Anggreni as the director. With support from USAID and in partnership with the Indonesian Association for Media Development or Perhimpunan Pengembangan Media Nusantara, Perludem is managing the Respect program, as Dika mentioned, the Asia Pacific Regional Support for Elections and Political Transition Program. The points we will note from the discussion are expected able to be a start or a basis of Respect program on effective observation and oversight of electoral processes. I wish we will have an interesting discussion in the short time, and I also invite all participants to contribute openly to have great insight on this topic. Thank you, and I give back the microphone to Dika.
Well, thank you, Mbak Joyce, for the remarks. Well, everyone, let's start the discussion. I want to share the international idea data as per 9 August 2020. At least 69 countries and territories across the globe have decided to postpone national and subnational election due to COVID-19. And at least 51 countries and territories have decided to hold national or subnational election as originally planned, despite concern related to COVID-19. And at least 16 countries and territories have held election that were initially postponed due to concern related to COVID-19. In Asia, there are 11 elections be postponed due to COVID-19. Among all, there are parliamentary election in Sri Lanka, originally scheduled for 25 April and moved to 5 August 2020, and regional election in 270 regions in Indonesia that is moved to 9 December 2020. And not to mention Myanmar general election, which will be held on schedule in November 2020. The election amidst the pandemic, there is a risk that decision of holding an election despite a pandemic outbreak could undermine their overall legitimacy by reducing voter turnout. Yet, with the need for limited exposure to large group and social distancing, citizens might be less likely to leave their homes to vote because of their health concern and that of their family members. And there's also a major risk that those deterred from voting will be disproportionately from the older age groups or those with underlying health condition. The legitimacy of the election may therefore be undermined by unfair restriction placed on a certain segment of the society and thus by their uneven participation. This undermine principle of inclusivity and equality in the electoral process. To discuss about those risks on voters and how to mitigate that, today we have 4 distinguished speakers, as mentioned earlier by Teresia Joyce. First is Adi Aman, Senior Program Manager of International IDEA, International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. Good evening, Canberra time, Bang Adi. Thank you for joining
Good evening,
us.
Dika. Good evening, Dika. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. The second one is Chandani Watawala, Executive Director of Asian Network for Free Election, ANFREL. How are you, Chandani?
I'm fine. Good afternoon, and also thank you for organizing the and as well as inviting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for us. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. The next one is Sai Kiao Swarmin, Executive Director of People's Alliance for Credible Election, PACE, joining us from Yangon, Myanmar. Hello, Kosai. It's nice to see you here. And last but not least, we have Hoirunisa Agustiati, or Mbak Ninis, Deputy Director of Perludem, soon to be Executive Director. Good afternoon, Pak.
Hi, everyone.
Sehat-sehat ya.
Sehat.
All right, without further ado, I will give the floor to Adi Aman first. Bang Adi, in your writing Election in a Pandemic Lesson from Asia, you mentioned that election in pandemic is possible, but difficult. You undermine that. Could you tell us more about the bright spot and pitfalls of holding election amid pandemic and lesson we can take, especially regarding safe and accessible voting for those who are vulnerable? Thank you. The floor is yours, Bang Adi.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dika. That's actually going to be my punchline. So let me share my screen. How do I do this now? Can you see my presentation now? Or?
Not yet.
Not yet. Sorry about this. It's not showing PowerPoint here. Okay. How about now?
Yeah, we can see it clearly now.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be. Thank you to Perludem once again for inviting and for your long-term collaboration with us, International IDEA, and especially through this Respect project under the leadership of Joyce and USAID for their support. As Dika mentioned, I will be talking rather generally and maybe regionally about COVID-19's impact on elections, but specifically towards women and vulnerable groups. Okay, can you see the next slide now? Are you able to see the next slide?
Still on the first page of the presentation.
Still on the first one. Ah, there you go. Okay. Okay, so the situation with elections and COVID-19, Dika has given the numbers to all of us earlier, so I won't go much into it. But I will say this, that there are more and more elections being held under the pandemic because I guess democracy must go on, and there are certain measures that can be taken to reduce the risk of outbreak and also the passing on of the disease to other people. But there are measures that needs to be put in place, and we have seen measures such as health and safety protocols. As you can see in the picture there, top left, voters are wearing masks and gloves, cleaning their hands with hand sanitizers, and the vicinity of the electoral process are being put in, sprayed with disinfectants, and then physical distancing requirements. So these elections are definitely different to the elections that we're used to in the past. Now, what impact has it been to voter turnout? Now, we can see that up until the Korean elections in mid-April, there have been quite a large disparity between the past election turnout to the COVID-19 election turnout, especially in the first two countries on the left of your screen there, Iran and France. But after the Korean elections, we can see rather marginal changes, be it a decrease or an increase to the voter turnout. So this means that it really depends on the context in terms of whether it's going to increase or not. But the impact in terms of numbers hasn't been that great. So it might be concluded that the whatever measures that the election management bodies employed in these countries have worked. But what are those measures? That's the important bit that we need to learn. So when we talk about vulnerable groups, though, we at International IDEA are using a global monitor that we have been maintaining called the Global Monitor of COVID-19's Impact on Democracy and Human Rights. And specifically, there's an attribute called social rights and equality. And within the social rights and equality attribute, there are sub-attributes that are relevant. First is gender equality. And this is to what extent does COVID-19 have any effect on gender equality? So there are examples that I tried to show. Sorry, the PowerPoint slide is not showing as it should be. So as you can see in the on your screen there on the slide, that there are exclamation marks, and the exclamation marks show that these are alert signs. So there are concerning events taking place in those countries. So the first one is Afghanistan, where Afghan women have less access to healthcare and COVID-19 testing, and maternal care and vaccinations have fallen as a result. This is based on a survey of Afghan health staff, And then in Bangladesh, women are some of the hardest hit economically by COVID-19, with more than 1 million government workers laid off, 80% of whom are women. Women domestic workers have also faced unemployment. So it's apparently this industry employs a lot of women, and therefore it's affecting women more. And then in India, there's been an increase in domestic violence against women during the lockdown. Between 23rd March and 16 April 2020, i.e. during the first 3 weeks of the lockdown in India, 239 complaints of domestic violence were received. 123 such complaints were received in the month leading up to the lockdown. So that's as far as gender equality is concerned, that there are issues around our region that needs to be addressed, and this will have an impact on voter participation in elections. The second sub-attribute that's relevant is social group equality. And this is where we look at various parts of society based on racial backgrounds, based on socioeconomic levels, and also on migration. So again, I'm in the interest of time, I'm alerting countries that have the alert marks. such as China. In April, Africans in China, and particularly in Guangdong province, were tested and quarantined forcefully for 14 days in an allegedly inhumane manner, even without symptoms. So racist attacks were widespread, including evictions from apartments and refusal of entry into hotels and restaurants. Malaysia, there have been arrests of hundreds of migrant workers in Kuala Lumpur's so-called COVID-19 red zones, where the infection rate is said to be high. The UN has condemned the move, and we have seen very recently that Al Jazeera that made a story out of this. The journalists have been arrested for questioning. And then in India again, there have been cases of Muslims being assaulted, harassed, and denied medical attention. Some Indian states have also seen spikes in caste-based discrimination and violence during the pandemic. Prime Minister Modi delivered an explicit call for unity in April, stating COVID-19 does not see race, religion, color, caste, creed, language, or border before striking. So this is a taste of the global COVID monitor that that International IDEA maintains, and it has bearings and effects on democratic processes, including elections. So things to voters should consider in COVID-19 elections are maintenance of their good health. So that's probably primary in their minds when they're thinking about their participation in COVID-19 elections. And then preservation of their voting rights and secrecy. So voters still want to vote, but they're concerned about how. And the how does it maintain their the secrecy of their votes? So what measures are being put in place to ensure these? And then voters want to elect legitimate government. So, and this is why we have seen quite high number of voter turnout in the recent elections in Asia. But first and foremost, their good health needs to be maintained. Okay. So, limitations on voter access. I'm sorry, the slide is not showing properly. So, in the paper I mentioned, well, in the article that Dika mentioned earlier, I wrote about limitations that voters would have on their access. So the first one is difficulty to vote for persons with disabilities and also COVID-19 positive patients. The COVID-19 positive patients, they are usually in quarantine or in hospital, and unless they are provided a specific access to vote, they won't be able to vote. And then for people with disabilities, it's such as blind people and people with limited movements would require physical assistance from others. UNDP's, as you can see in the screen now, UNDP's rapid assessment of the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 on persons with disabilities in Vietnam last May found a respondent saying, "It is difficult for me to respect social distancing and hygiene rules because people with visual impairments always need a sighted guide when going to a new place, such as a polling station, and have to touch to identify objects, such as voting equipment, and orient themselves around the polling station. So this is inherently an impediment for such people with disabilities. Okay. Secondly, overseas voters in lockdown countries cannot vote. And this we can see from the South Korean elections, and also the Philippines recently suspended an overseas voting registration exercise that's supposed to go on till the 30th September. And then certain voting arrangements are not available. So for the elderly, Australia, for example, they have announced that they wouldn't conduct mobile voting for their one of their by-elections last July. And instead, postal ballots are afforded to them. So there are various alternatives of voting methods available to use. I'll get into that later. Victoria, also in Australia, state of Victoria, has just today, I think, or yesterday, announced that they will hold their local elections of more than 4 million voters through postal ballots only. And this is similar to Bavaria in Germany earlier in the year. All right, so I found Amnesty International has come up with the following statement, that there's disproportionate impact on certain groups. Anyone can get COVID-19, but certain groups appear to be at greater risk of severe illness and death. This includes older people and people with pre-existing medical conditions. It's also likely that other marginalized groups, including people living in poverty, people with disabilities, and people in detention, including migrants and asylum seekers, will face additional challenges in protecting themselves and accessing treatment. Plus, as our global COVID monitor has shown, that there are maltreatments that these groups have also experienced in various countries. So not only they're at greater risk of getting infected, they're also not treated properly. And therefore, in designing responses to COVID-19, Amnesty International continues, states must ensure that the needs and experiences of specific groups are fully addressed. And this is no different in the electoral process. So electoral management bodies and other policymakers need to ensure that this is put in place. So what do they have to put in place to mitigate the adverse impacts on vulnerable groups? So the first, in my opinion, is to ensure the curve is flat while the elections is happening. I'm sorry, I've got graphs to show actually, but it's not showing here. But the last 4 elections, well, 5 elections now, starting from Mongolia at the end of June, to Malaysia by-election, Singapore elections, Tokyo gubernatorial elections, all in July, and Sri Lankan elections just last week. The elections took place while the curve is flat. So this means that there's a less risk for infection, and possibly that has contributed to the high confidence level of voters in going out to vote. The second is to ensure adequate voter information campaigns there. What sort of measures AMBs are putting in place? Where can voters go to vote safely, preferably not so far from where they live, so that they don't have to travel far. So these voter information campaigns would also increase confidence level among voters. And lastly, EMBs should implement special voting arrangements for vulnerable groups. What are these special voting arrangements? I've already mentioned postal voting. Also, you can see in the on the screen there examples from Europe. Early voting, which means that voters can vote not only on polling day but also in previous days. Therefore, there's less crowding in the polling stations. Mobile voting, I've mentioned. Mobile voting is not through cell phones, but it's actually the ballot boxes move around to people who are eligible to vote in through mobile voting. And then proxy voting also is available, although usually it's for those with vision impairment, but it's getting less and less used, I believe, in various countries as equipment such as Braille, templates, and also those using electronic voting, they have audio guidance for these people with disabilities. So these are the three, I think, main mitigating measures that can be employed, considered and employed by electoral management bodies. Dika, thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm sorry there's a malfunction with the slides. Thank you for your attention, though. Thank you. Looking forward to discussion.
Right. Thank you, Bang Adi, for your presentation. So some of my notes of key points on your presentation are voter turnout. It really depends to the context. So the high voter turnout really depend on how election commission maintain protection of voters' health. And fear of infection is arguably could lead to low voter turnout. I'm gonna go to the next speaker, but just reminder for the audience here, if you have any question during the speaker presentation, you can simply write it on the chat box, and I'll read it later on the Q&A session. So next I'll go to Chandani. First, I want to congratulate Chandani and all citizens of Sri Lanka for the successful conduct of the 2020 Sri Lankan parliamentary election. Congratulations once again for your participation in Sri Lankan election. So ANFREL has deployed 6 assessment teams to the districts of Kurunegala, Polonnaruwa, Jaffna, Trincomalee, and Muara Elia to monitor polling and counting process for the 2020 Sri Lankan parliamentary election. And the election is twice postponed, supposed to be held in April. We want to hear about the strategies of the assessment or observation amid the pandemic and the key takes of the assessment. So Chandani, floor is yours.
Thank you, Dika. And also thank you very much for Perludem, and for one of the strong member in Indonesia. Of course, that respect Ms. Joyce, and also that international idea, Adiyaman, our friend. And we all are, and also the COSAI also, we cannot forget, like the PACE also one of our member, and also the, I hope that I can share some of the like experience in Sri Lanka. It may be helpful for the upcoming like other elections in rest of the, especially in the Asia. And yeah, that the holding the periodic, please go to the first slide, okay. Holding the periodic, genuine, free and fair election is the fundamental rights stipulated in many international instruments, including the Bangkok Declaration for Free and Fair Elections. The current restriction in place in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, however, limit traditional interaction between the different stakeholders during elections, among other things. The year 2020 is a crucial year for Asia, as key elections are set to take place in many countries, including Sri Lanka. Article 71 of the Constitution is giving power to the President for dissolving the Parliament after completing 4.5 years. I'm just giving like actually the background of how the election, before go to the what are the success, what are the like a failure, what we can maybe improve, and before that I think better to give that the background information. For dissolving Parliament after completing 4.5 years. If the President did not dissolve the Parliament, it can be continued until the September month. The last presidential election was took place in November 16. Then the new government came out, and then they like they wanted to dissolve before the correct or the date complete on the September 1st. When he dissolved the parliament, there was no COVID-19 cases in Sri Lanka, despite growing crisis in China, Europe, and East Asia. The first confirmed local case was reported in March 11, and by March 18, the number was 53. That is the period, actually the March 18th is the period, the election commission is calling for the nomination for the candidates from the political parties. The last day for the nomination was March 19th, 12 noon. Then there was a discussion between that among the observer groups and also the EC and also the other respective groups. And is it like we can have hold the election with this increase in the pandemic, because there's a country normal situation is changing with lockdown and restricting for international travel. Political parties and election monitors that call for risk mitigation plan before go to the elections. Please go to the next slide. Dika. Okay. Yeah, and then the EC whole like, and also that however that even though that the election, as already Dika mentioned, the initially election commission set for the election date was the April 25, but however they postponed the election on March 19 around 2 p.m. announcing the postpone, even though they did not give the next date for the elections. And at that time, that they like according to the criteria or the procedure, they have to gazette in the names of the candidate and their serial numbers, but they hold for a while until the election day confirmed. Then but in the Article 75 of the Constitution, mandates for the electing the Parliament must be within 3 months after the dissolution of Parliament. That means that March 2nd, they dissolve the Parliament, then they have to have it elections within the 3 months. But the last election, like election was held in the August 5, but it almost like 5 months or the 6 months, and the country rule without the parliament. With all like the challenges, election was set for the August 5 after 2 times postponed. First date was April 25, then second date was that June 20. And anyway, the election over, and the most of the domestic observer groups, and including ANPL, and we are witness for the process of the election, and also that we believe this is one of the success election in South Asia, even with the COVID-19 challenge. However, we will wait for another 2 weeks that are there any raising number of COVID cases, and the victory go to the Gotabaya Rajapaksa government, 2/3 majority, and they got 145 seats among the out of 225 seats. They need for another 5 seats, and they already collect from their allies. For that means that they already have a 2/3 majority. They will go for constitutional changes and whatever things. We will wait and see. I'm not going to discuss about the post-election scenario. For the last election, over 16 million voters are eligible to vote to elect that 225 members for 5-year term. And structure of the parliament, 196 legislative seats, and also the 29 seats were the proportionally distributed among the political parties based on their national vote share. And the last elections, even though during the pandemic, the voter turnout was high, 75%, it is closer to the normal voter turnout during the parliamentary elections. Please go to the next slide. This is like the rough the diagram or the infographic, how the current parliamentary seats allocated from these elections. And also that, please go to the next. Yes, and also that okay, that how this how they organize the elections. That is, I think I would like to talk about more about that easy preparation for elections. This is very much different any of the elections which I have been experienced. I have seen the EC is closely working with all the stakeholders. First time they work with the health ministry. One of the best practice in Sri Lanka is from the last election. We can take it. EC is very much closely working with the civil society and also the rest of the authorities, including the health. And of course, that the Election Commission of Sri Lanka, we already give like a credit. They are welcoming the stakeholders, including the civil society, domestic observer groups, compared to the other countries in Asia. There are countries, but like Indonesia is very much close to that our structure. They also welcoming that the civil society and the other stakeholders. I think that way very much helpful for overcoming the challenge of COVID-19. And the civil society and health sector, we work together with the EC to prepare the roadmap for elections. For that, please go to the next slide. Yeah, Health Ministry issued the health guidelines for organizing the elections. EC has been organizing the mock polling station, counting centers for testing the process prior to the elections. They have been given opportunity to participate, even the people or the voters of the community where the mock poll station take place, to get like the experience what they, and also they that way they help increase the trust they have, and also the voters like a risk-free environment to vote. Voter awareness programs, the island-wide their voter awareness programs in media and also the posters, it was around the country to increasing the trust, as well as that prepare the voters to what they have to prepare, the wearing mask, bringing their own pen, and also the hand sanitizer is available. Even the election commission chair was telling to the media, this is the second place, like after your home, the polling station is the most secure place after your home. It's like a giving like a trust among the voters. And also that health guidelines, actually that health guidelines, there are a lot of guidelines, but it is gazetted only the 3 guidelines after the advocating campaign from the different groups. And that is like extending the time like a the campaign period, actually there are limited number of for the 300 people for the normal campaign, and if the party leader is coming, they allow only the 500 people, and social distance among the people, including the election, the polling station, also the social distance they keep it. And also the election day, especially they extend the time for the voting 4 to 5 p.m. That is also the one of the specially invited, the 4 to 5 p.m. the last 1 hour, the voters who are at home for self-quarantine. And that is one of the thing. And also that the polling staff also the train before that, how they can prepare. And this is actually that one of the thing actually that the election commission tried to engage with the advanced voting, but that Adi or Aman also mentioned about that alternative way of increasing the voter turnout. But however, in Sri Lanka, we don't have that legal provision for the advanced voting, except the postal voting for the who are working during the election day. The election commission failed to do that. For if that work, there may be a lot of people, those who are in prison, those who are in hospitals, those who are in quarantine centers. 4 to 5 hours, especially for allocated for the people who are isolated at home. I mean the self-quarantine people at home. Okay, the next slide. And how the next slide, please. Okay, I already shared that easy. What are the challenges easy face? And then please go to the next slide. Okay, civil society engagement. No, civil society, we can like actually that PAFRL and CME are the most prominent domestic observer groups in Sri Lanka. It is our ANFRL member also. They work with the election commission closely during the preparing the roadmap, as well as that the ANFRL also engage with those two groups for prepare the health, like a code of conduct for the civil society workers who are working in the election day. And this document actually endorsed by the 6 domestic observer groups: CAFE, CMEV, Mothers and Daughters, MFFE, National Polling Election Observer Group, as well as the PAFRL. And also that including ANFRL also that we follow, and also that whatever the observers, then they join for the staff, they join for our work, then we asked to follow all the health guidelines it's stipulated in the code of conduct. And during the election day, PAFRL, the same like the other day's election day, they managed to deploy 340 stationary observers, 260 mobile vehicles, 1,100 observers for the election day, and 319 LTOs. And also that the first time they came out with another best practice, they introduced online application for gathering data. That is like reducing the like a physical contacts, and also this is actually that's a good the strategy for collecting, and also the accurate, and also the on time they are get the collector, and also they observe the social media monitoring process also. CMEV, please go to the another slide. And according to their data, they also that engage in the same procedure like last time. 100 long-term observers, 1,125 field coordinators, 3,000 statistic in the stationary observers on the election day. And also that this time they work with the PWDs to include the PWDs observers to the mobile observations. And they did the very specific work observing the media, ground campaign, TV, radio, and paper advertisement. When we look at those two groups, actually that during the COVID-19, mitigating the risk, then they continue the same process like their engagement during the elections. Can you please go to the next slide? The ANPRL, actually ANPRL, our engagement is like we thought of deploying 35 observers like the last election. However, even though election commission, they gave the accreditation for ANPRL EU, due to some logistical difficulties, we thought of maybe scale down our mission to the 12 people, even though that also not realistic because of that the airport closed down. It's like the bringing the observers from the low risk countries, that is not possible. Then we realized at least that we have to do like this is the first election in Asia during the COVID-19. We need that experience to the other countries. We came out with the plan assessing the 2020 elections, how the electoral challenges in Sri Lanka during the COVID-19 pandemic. And therefore, then we, like, even though we cannot bring the international observers, we thought of like mobilizing the local resources who are already like a local expat who are already in the Sri Lanka. They came for studies or their background is in democracy, elections, human rights. We strategized these 6 people to go to the 6 different districts, as already Dika mentions, pre-election days and also the election day and also the counting day. And this is actually top of that what we are doing, that for the remotely we organize that interview with the different groups, the electoral stakeholders, our staff who are based in Bangkok as well as the KL. They mainly did the online interview with the election procedure. And we are aiming to release our assessment report by end of this month, and we hope that this assessment will help for most of the countries, including Myanmar and rest of countries, how the what are the failures, what are the best practices, and also are there any areas we can take back to the other countries. Could you please to go to the last slide? Last slide. Okay, and the last slide is actually that lastly I would like to highlight mostly that what are the areas we already fail. One of the thing is, or the lacking part in Sri Lanka, it is not only the COVID-19, it's like an ongoing process, and so many years that election stakeholders advocate, campaign for that. Election law is not appropriate to the free and fair election at all, and so many discussions take place. I hope that in future our advocacy, our campaign maybe work for that reviewing or revising the laws. And also that in Sri Lanka there's no campaign finance law, and in this regard most because that the COVID-19 restricted the physical contact, then therefore most of the political parties, candidates, they increase the number of the advertisement in the social media, Google, including the election day also. There are a lot of campaign materials, campaign advertisement in the media, and also that that high number of money they spend during the campaign period as well as the election day, because we don't have any limit for the campaign finance, and there's no advocate media laws. Media, the last presidential election, if somebody follow the last presidential elections, government, this government is in the opposition side, and the government media, they did not support for the government, the current government, they support for the previous government. But this time everything is, most of the media supporting for the one party, one group. Only few media, we can nominate or name only 1 or 2 media, they supported on the only the other party's opposition. The media bias is very high in this election, but compared to the last presidential elections that we also Anwal also highlighted religious influence, but this time we did not see much religious influence in these elections. And the election cost, this is actually 1.85 million election commissions itself spend because of increase in the equipment, increase in the measures and other activities, training, that is from the government money. What I mentioned earlier also, the campaign advertisement other than the political parties, it is very high in this election because of this COVID-19 itself. Thank you very much, and also that I am welcoming some comment or the questions from the group. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Chandani, for the presentation. I would like to invite all the audience, if you have any comments or questions, to write it on the chat box. Some of the keynotes from Chandani, I wrote Sri Lankan election conducted when there were no cases. However, there was health guidelines to mitigate risk. Election monitoring organization also have COVID-19 code of conduct for election observer that the organization are committed to following COVID-19 policies implemented by health authorities and prioritize online forms of communication to limit as much as possible the need for in-person meetings and all the code of conduct on the document. I think it is advisable to avoid holding election while the curve is on steep rise, because Sri Lankan election is twice postponed. So I think this is a good lesson for those who will hold the election. They need the election management bodies requires decision makers to predict the future through models created by epidemiologists or simulation to help make decision. I will move to Mr. Sai. Myanmar is expected to conduct the next general election in November, and the election is very special because it is the first election held under the government led by opposition for the last 3 decades. So it's special. And my question for COSA is, what could be the hotspot that need to be mitigated of the election, and what is your observation or monitoring strategies for the upcoming election? COSA, floor is yours.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share our work and what's really happening in Myanmar. I mean, like, for a brief background on Myanmar. So we are expecting our the 3rd general elections in November 8, this year, November 8. So this is the 3rd general election. If we count 2010 is the first election. So, I mean, election is still very new to us. I mean, one is come to the voters and one is come to the political parties. We are still very new to these process. So, I mean, like, 2015 election was, I mean, like, the international community and as well as the domestic analysts saw 2015 election was a big turning point in our political process. So again, I mean, 2020 election also an interesting milestone for our political process, because I mean, like, having 2020 elections mean we are continuing our political transition process, so which is crucial for a different aspect. So one of the key features for 2020 election is like, there are more and more political leaders started to join the election and see the election as a legitimate playground to get the power. So I mean, like, election is becoming a legitimate game in the country. So within this short period. But unfortunately, we are in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak. But I mean, again, fortunately, so far we are just a few cases, like about 100 cases, like technically, I mean, 360 cases we have been tested. So, and the local transmission has been in, I mean, it's already contained. So, I mean, compared to the regional country, the situation, COVID-19 situation in Myanmar is not that bad. But, you know, there are still second wave, third wave. I mean, like we are still, we have to aware that we are still with COVID-19 pandemic in our society. So I mean, like for 2021, it's come to the numbers, we are expecting like plus or minus 40 million voter. And we are expecting more than 90 parties will be competing in this upcoming election. So we don't know whether, I mean, in 2015, there were 6,000 candidates has been filed. We expect that there will be more in this country. So in 2015, I mean, like we have about 12% women candidate. So we are expecting more in this country, which is also good. I mean, there are some political parties, they already released their candidates. So we saw that there are a lot of young people, a lot of women candidates in the candidate list, so which is kind of interesting, I mean, like situations in coming months. And again, I mean, like we have, there are more security situation in northern and Myanmar and northern Rakhine State, which was not the case back in 2015, but now there are active armed conflict in northern Rakhine State. So we are concerned about if there will be elections or not. If there will not be election in Rakhine State, I mean, it's a huge political consequence for that area, because Rakhine State is the only state where ethnic-based party who won majority back in 2015. So it is interesting to see how the elections will be going on in terms of security, especially in terms of the election result. So, I mean, one is come to what is really a concern, and what is my observations regarding the 2020 election is that there are, I mean, like some concerns among the parties and civil society in developing at this point, because of the way, I mean, like citizens has been engaged, the way the civil society has been engaged is becoming very limited because of the COVID-19 travel restriction. So first, I mean, like back in 2019, when we conducted a opinion poll regarding the elections, when we asked the questions like, if there were general elections in weekend, how likely are you going to vote? So we have only 48% of the adult citizens saying that they already made their mind to vote in the election. So I mean, like the intention to vote back in 2019 was I mean, compared to the last 2015, like it's pretty low. So it is a concerning number for us. And then with this COVID-19, without having proper management, or if we can't guarantee the safety of the voter, so we are very concerned about the number of the voter on the election day. So this is the general concerns regarding that. But when we look at the containment of the COVID-19, so far, I mean, our health ministry has managed to contain the local transmission. So the only affected area is the Yangon region and Yangon state. So besides from Yangon region and Yangon state, so I mean, we can only identify only a few cases in some locations. So I mean, like, if we trusted this statistic, so we are pretty okay regarding the COVID pandemic containment and procedures and procedure at this point. But when we look at the legal framework regarding the election, so we are only using the current legal framework is basically designed to manage the elections on the ordinary time, but it is not designed to a kind of situations like this. So in terms of like voter education, in terms of dissemination of the information to the voter, so we don't have a kind of specific procedure to enable civil society to reach out the voter. But I mean, like, people are saying that the social media could be a tool to reach out to the voter. But for me, even though we have a Facebook user has been increased, but not necessarily covering the whole country. So there are a lot of locations where the social media is not really penetrated yet. So I think that we have to come up with a creative way to reach out the citizen, so that citizens know who is competing in their particular area, and what is the voting procedure, and what is the COVID-19 prevention procedure. One they go to the polling station. So we still need a kind of a proper mechanisms to reach out to the voter, so that the voter feel that they are secure to engage the election process. So I mean, this is one of the concerns I'm very concerned. And another concern is, like, we just announced the campaign period for the political parties, which will be 60 days before the election day. So the current campaign legal framework is only designed to manage the physical campaign, which we used to back in the past. So we do not have a specific measure for them. Policy and procedure. So only 15 people can come gather at one time. So it's still very difficult for the political party and campaign for the political parties and candidates to engage their campaign activity. So we need to come up with a more specific procedure for the candidate to be able to reach out to their voters. And I mean, if not, I mean, there will be a lot of criticism on the way the level playing field has been. I mean, the way they see the electoral environment, and another thing is that, I mean, like one is come to the resources to conduct the 2020 elections. So we were not very sure yet. So currently we will have in 48,000 polling stations across the country. So because of COVID-19, definitely there will be more polling stations. And so we do not know what is the election day management, like how the polling station official will be protected, or will be provided the health equipment. We do not know how the voters will be provided the masks and the hand sanitizer, something like that. So it kind of like we are concerned about the resource and technical capacity of this point. And the last concerns for me at this point is because of the restriction of the movement, and because of the restriction of the political party to be able to reach out their voter. So there are a lot of limitations for the non-incumbent political party to reach out their party. So, and then we were not able to reach agreement. What is the possibility, and what is the procedure for them to be reached out? So I mean, like we really haven't had a proper agreement within the political parties. So which make me very concerned about like the way we are going to conduct the elections. So at the end of the day, the losing side might not necessarily agree with the result, and there will be a lot of electoral disputes after the after the election. So these are the major concerns we are. But I mean, I hope that the elections commissions will address as in coming month. But I mean the time is running out. We are just only like 2.5 months away from the election. So which is really crucial for us. So for me in Myanmar, to be able to conduct 2020 this coming general election successfully, we need a proper coordinations between our election management body, in our case, Union Election Commission, and political parties, and the civil society, and the media, without having proper coordination among these four parties. Well, I think it will be very difficult to have a legitimate, credible elections in coming months. So this is my real concern. So regarding election observations, I mean, we are a very difficult time for this moment. So pace is not very sure yet we will be able to grant it. So I mean, we already have we already have a kind of a trace like election commissions may not necessarily be grant and accreditation to every civil society. So we are concerned about the level of engagement in this upcoming election. So, I mean, when it's come to the election observation, so I think that we will have a international observation missions coming election, but because of the travel restriction and visa restriction, I'm not sure how many international observers will be able to deploy in this upcoming election. And then because of the COVID-19, because of the resource limitation of the resource availability, we will not be able to see so many domestic observers in this election. So, I mean, there is a huge gap within the election observation, which will be a huge consequence on the credibility of our election. So, I mean, like, we have a lot of challenges in our upcoming election. I mean, like, but I mean, like, I'm pretty positive. Like, once the campaign activity started, we hope that we will be able to mobilize the citizens to go out and vote without infected by the COVID-19, and then we hope that all the political party will accept whatever the result will become out in the upcoming elections. I think I will stop here for now, and then if you have more questions and comments, I mean, I'm happy to take it. Thank you very much, Dika.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kosai. There are some points that I want to wrap up. Kosai concerned about the COVID-19 that has a major impact on the political fortune of incumbent, as well as on voter participation. An election at the time of pandemic could advantage the incumbent who may benefit from leading a crisis response over the opposition candidates, and the opposition candidates may have fewer resources but also need to adjust to new campaign methods. And the second one is the civil society engagement and observing the upcoming election. The way civil society organization engages very limited because travel restriction. I'm gonna stop there and move to Mbak Ninis, Hoirin Nur Agustiati from Perludem. Mbak Ninis, President Joko Widodo is urging all parties to prioritize the health and safety of voters and polling station officer in the upcoming 2020 regional election in December. But yet, way before the election day, there were 21 Indonesian election commission KPU employees who tested positive for COVID-19, and all of them test positive after taking the swab test, which was held by the KPU for 3 days on 3, 4, and 5 August 2020. There is some belief that it caused by the voting simulation held by KPU. How you respond to that? What do you think election officials should do to protect the health and safety of voters and election officials through the electoral process, and without compromising the integrity or legitimacy of an election? Mbak Ninis, dipersilahkan, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dika. First of all, I would like to inform you in my area, I have a heavy rain in my area, so I hope the sound of the rain doesn't interrupt my sound. So Ricky, can you please share my person? Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So first of all, thank you for having me in this discussion to talk about the strengthening of voters' position in election and in the pandemic period. Next slide, Ricky, please. Okay, in the context of Indonesia, previously we planned to have the simultaneous election in September 23, 2020. But because of the situation, the pandemic situation, and then the government decide to postpone the election to December 9, 2020. I will tell a brief situation what happened between March until now. First of all, when the first case of COVID-19 happened in Indonesia in the early of March, almost many stakeholders of the election suggest the election management body to postpone the election. Because since the first case of COVID-19 happened in Indonesia, day per day is increasing, and it impact the election stages in Indonesia. And then on the March 21st, the Indonesia General Election Commission suspend 4 major activities. So at that time, we haven't decided that all of the stages of the election is postponed, but only 4 stages of the election is postponed. The first is the process of the voter registration, the verification of the independent candidate supporter, the verification of voter list that hold door-to-door, and then the inauguration of ad hoc officer. So the activities is suspended due to the pandemic situation. And then the General Election Management Body, the Parliament, and also the government, they have a meeting. They discuss the strategy about how to hold the election during the pandemic. At that time, the KPU have 3 options offered to the government. The first is to postpone the election to the next year. The first option is to postpone the election only 3 months in the December 9, 2020. And the second option is to hold the election in the March 2021. And the second option is to hold the election on 29 of September 2021. And then the government and the parliament and also the KPU agree to only postpone the election only for 3 months. So we will have the election on December 9, 2020. At that time, we, especially we as a civil society and also the other stakeholders of election suggest that it is difficult to hold if we have only postpone the election only 3 months, because the election stages in Indonesia is very complex. Almost of the stages will involve the public, the mass of the people. For example, the campaign process, the training for the officers, and then the officer will come door to door to the voters' house to check, to verify their list, their name in the voter list. So it is hard, and also the KPU at that time the KPU didn't have the regulation how to conduct the election in the pandemic situation, because our local election law it regulates the election in the normal situation, not in the pandemic situation. So that is why the government released the regulation in lieu of law number 2 2020 that said that the election will be postponed to December 9 2020, but the regulation only stated about the time of the election, but the government regulation doesn't regulate how to regulate the election during the pandemic situation. So that is why the KPU released the regulation to hold the election in the pandemic situation. And also the KPU asked the government to increase the election budget about 4 trillion rupiah, the additional budget to hold the election, because like I said before, the election in Indonesia is a complex stages. Almost all the stages will involve the public, the mass together. So the officer need to provide with the protective equipment for themselves, at least a face mask, so that the virus will not infect the others. So this is the brief situation about the Indonesia 2020 simultaneous election. Next slide. So if we see the statistic, the 2020 simultaneous election will be held in 270 areas, consists of nine provincial or choose governors and vice governors, and then 224 regions and 37 mayors. If we see the potential voters, it's about 105 million voters, consists of 52 million male voters and also 52.6 female voters. So the composition between male and female voters is almost the same, 50% and 50%. But and then I will talk later about the female voters, the position of female voters, especially in the pandemic situation, because we have a big number of female voters, but the discourse of this election that discussed in the media, in the about the candidacy, they still limit discussion about the position of women voter and also the people with disabilities in the election. And if we see the number of voters with disabilities, it's about 137,000 voters, consists of 66,000 with the psychic disabilities, physical disabilities, 11.9 blind disabilities, 19.5 deaf, and then another voter with the disabilities. This is the data from the Ministry of Home Affairs when they give the potential voters to the KPU on the earlier of 2020. Next slide. If we talk about the election, I believe when we talk about the election, there is a hope in election, because we as a citizen already give half of our power to the political institution. So the election can be media as a reward or punishment to the political institution. If we like the performance of our incumbent, then we can choose again in the election. And if we don't like the performance, we can choose another candidate in the election, because of because half of our power already given to the political institution. And then when people come to the polling station, it means we believe that our vote will give contribution to the change. And when we participate, we already participate on the election. But now the hope is in this uncertainty situation, because the election is held during the pandemic situation. We as a voter feel we need to be guaranteed that when we go to the polling station, everything will be safe, that we will not get infected by the COVID-19 disease or another problems. For example, when the officers come to our house to check the voter list. They are already provided with the health equipment, the protective equipment, the face mask, or they have their own health procedures. So because when we are as a voter do not feel safe, then it will impact the participation on the December 9, 2020. Go to the next slide. Next slide, Ricky. So this is the illustration of voters' participation in Indonesia elections. So since 2014, we have election every year except in 2016. In 2014, we have a legislative election and presidential election. As you can see on the screen, that the participation on the 2014 legislative election is 75.11%, and it decreased in the presidential election. And then in the 2015 simultaneous election, the participation on the 69.20% participation, and then 2017 simultaneous election, we have 74.5% participation. On the 2018 simultaneous election, we have 73.34% the participation, and the last election in 2019 concurrent election, we have 82% public participation. So there is assumption that if we have very often of election every year, it will impact the public participation in the election. Of course, there is some factors that of the participation. For example, in 2019 election, we have concurrent election between the presidential and the legislative election, and the competition between the president candidate is very strong. So people are eager to come to the election. Go to the next slide, Ricky. There are some factors of participation. The first is the regulation. If the regulation, for example, in Indonesia, there is a regulation when the citizen who have the right to vote is when he or she already reached 17 years old or already married. But the regulation also stated that he or she also obligated to have an ID card. So when they don't have an ID card, even though they are already 17 years old, they cannot have the right to vote. So when the regulation is regulate, it is hard for people to get, and the condition is not Indonesian citizen already have the e-ID card. So it impacted to the participation of the people. And then the administrative factor, for example, when their name is not stated on the voter list, when the voter list is not comprehensive, so they cannot go to the polling station because this administrative factor. The other factor is the political factor. If the competition between the candidate is very tight, it also can be motivate the voters to go to the polling station. And then the independency of the election management body. If we believe that the KPU, the election management body, are independent, they do their job well, no corruption, they are non-partisan, we trust the EMBs, then people will also go to the polling station. And then the information, it is important in this kind of circumstances, because this today's situation is different, where when everything is done virtually, we also the government also eager the candidate to have to do campaign by virtual, but sometimes because of this kind of situation, not all the voters, not all the people can get the information equally, because there is some people in Indonesia who still live in remote area. that they don't have access to the internet connection, to the technology. So when when they cannot get the information, it means the election, it violates the principle of fair in the election. The election should be fair not only in the competition process, but also we as the voters can get the information equally. The other factors is inclusiveness of the voter list. So the voter list did not exclude the minority group, for example, people with disabilities, indigenous people, women, because sometimes people with disabilities, especially the people with the mental disabilities, they are live in the shelter or in the hospital. Sometimes they are not registered in the voter list. So it also impact when the voter registration process is not inclusive, then they cannot give their participation on the election. And also in this context, we as voter also need the guarantee of safety and healthy. How the EMBs can assure that when we go to the polling station, everything is safe. When the electoral officer come to our house to check our name, is they are all protected with the health equipment, masker, and so on. So we can participate in the election. Next slide. There is a survey done conducted by Kompas. Kompas is one of the major newspaper in Indonesia. The conclusion of the survey stated that around 69.2% of the respondents choose that the simultaneous election should be held in 2021, because in 2020, in the middle of this pandemic, simultaneous election is not the priority, because the pandemic not only impact the political aspect but also social, economic, and everything. People get fired, people lost their jobs, so their priority now is to have to be safe in this situation. Their concern is about the health, the economic. They do not think about the election. So I think the policymakers should see the people's perception in this situation. Kompas did survey 3 times, and all of the 3 surveys said that people want to the election be held after the pandemic of COVID-19 is decreasing, because when we see the case in Indonesia now, it's still increasing. It's about 1,000 cases a day on average. So it's still in a high number of the case day per day. So we afraid that it will affect the participation of the election, especially when we see there is because we cannot observe all of the stages of the election. For example, when the political party nominating the candidate, we cannot see whether the process is free and fair in nominating the candidate. We cannot control, because everyone is in their home right now. So many factors that will also affect the participation in a local election. Next slide. So when we talk about the participation of women and people with disabilities as a minority group in the election, sometimes women face discrimination. For example, is marginalization, the exclusion of women from various aspects, for example, economic, social, cultural, political, which result in discrimination. This marginalization is based on wrong assumption or perspective on women. So women cannot participate in the there is an assumption that women cannot participate in the political world, because women have only do the domestic job. And then there are violence against women, physical and non-physical treatment that hurts, injured women, subordination, the view that places women as a second-class being is assumption or stereotype that are discriminate the woman, and then stereotype labeling that is labeling the woman, and then the last is the double burden. So in this situation, women face a double burden even higher, because everyone is work from home, their kids is school from home, and then they have to manage everything. They have to take care of the health of the family, and they are overwhelmed with this situation. So they don't even think about that there is election in the December 9, 2020. So they cannot maybe they don't even think how to get information about the election. Maybe they don't even know that there is an election on December 9, 2020, because they are overwhelmed with their job in their home. So I think it is important that the election management body, the candidate, to reach the women voter, because as we see in my previous slide, that almost 50% of women will be in the voter list. So it is a big number, but the discourse about the woman needs, about the woman participation is still limited in the situation right now. Next slide is problem faced with faced by voter with disabilities. The first is the regulation problem. Sometimes the interpretation about the laws and the convention to protect the people with disabilities is still limited. Maybe some of the election management body officer still do not know the regulation that people with disabilities also have right to vote in the election. And the second is access to information. Like I said before, when in this situation, when everything is held virtually, sometimes we forget to give access to the voter with disabilities to get information about the election, about the campaign, about the vision and mission of the candidate, about the election information. It is limited to the voter with disabilities because they don't have access to the information. And then physical condition. When the polling station is not access enough, for example, with people with who use the wheelchair, or when the polling station do not have a template for the blind voters, it become a problem to the voters with disabilities. And then the stigmatization. There is a stigma that people with disabilities cannot give their right to vote because they are because they think that they cannot give their right to the election, especially stigma to the mental disabilities. The stigma is still high in Indonesia, where the people with disabilities are in the hospital, in the shelters, and because there is the stigma, so they are not give their right to go to the polling station. So it is important to strengthen the women and voter disabilities in the 2020 simultaneous election. Next slide, Ricky. Because we have the big number of women in the election. The EMBs, the candidate, the political parties should engage the women and the voter with disabilities to be part of the discourse. Ask them what is their need in this election, how to give access to them. So so the EMBs, the political parties, the candidate have a big homework. They have to have work harder to reach this group, because when because they have, like I said before, they have the big number of women. There is no discourse, but there is no discourse about women perspective in this election. For example, how women can be participate to be the candidate on this election. There is no discussion about that. It is also important to have to give access of information about the candidate's background, about the election stages, about how to guarantee the healthy and the safety in the polling station. So the information are given to the voters equally. So there is no one are left to the information access. Next slide, Ricky. So my conclusion is election must not violate the principle of democratic election and have legal certainty. Like I said before, fairness in election is not only mean that fairness in the competition, but also fair in the access to the information. And it takes time to hold the election in this new normal area, because in Indonesia, the case of COVID-19 cases is still high every day. So I also believe that we do not know when this pandemic ends, but when we decide to hold an election, it takes time to have a good regulation. So there is a legal certainty in holding the election. So there is there is a need a comprehensive risk management for the implementation of the election stages. The EMB should have comprehensive risk management. Their mitigation, like Dika said before. We are very surprised when there are 21 staff of the KPU are positive with COVID-19. So people will questioning, is it safe having this election in this pandemic? What is the KPU risk management for that? And then the next is development of protocol for organizing regional election that is compatible with the COVID-19 handling protocol. It is hard to have the election in this situation, because there is like a different perspective. For example, when there is a person who are positive with COVID-19 and he or she should be isolated in the hospital, in the health perspective, when people are isolated, they cannot visit anyone, they cannot meet with anyone. But in the perspective of the election, no one is left in the election. So everybody should have the access to give their right to vote. So it is kind of conflict perspective between the health protocol and the election protocol. So it is so that is why it is difficult and complex in holding election in this situation. But because we already decide that we will have the election in this year, so it is important to the EMBs to guarantee, to make sure, to assure the voters that they are safe when we participate, not only in the polling station. For example, if we want to see the campaign process when the officers come to our house. And the last one is women and voters with disabilities cannot be excluded in this election process, especially in the pandemic situation, because like the previous speaker said before, the minority group become more vulnerable in this situation. So it is become the homework for the KPU, the Bawaslu, and then also the candidate to engage this marginalized group, so they are not left behind in this election. I think that's all, Dika, and we can go to the discussion. Thank you, everyone. Halo Dika. Okay, Dika cannot unmute his microphone. Is Ricky or Amel can unmute Dika?
All right.
Okay.
Well, hello.
Okay, Dika, we can hear you.
All right. Yeah, so Ninis mentioned that voters need a guarantee of safety to go to the polls. And not only that, it is linked to the statement Kosai already mentioned earlier, that election management bodies or election commission need a creative way to reach voter, to inform them voting procedure, COVID-19 procedure, to build trust for a voter to go to a polling station. And it is also linked to the participation, the voter turnout. For many countries that have held elections since the coronavirus outbreak, voter turnout on election day has been severely depressed. But voter turnout will be high if election commission maintain protection of voters' health. And especially for vulnerable voters, the challenge that may be faced by vulnerable voters must be well understood and addressed. Well, everyone, I would like to move to the Q&A session. I would like to invite audience, if there is anyone who wish to participate in the conversation, to raise hand button. And our team will let your mic on if there is anyone who wishes to participate. Is there? Before I read the question that already gathered. All right, I will go to the first question that asked by Pak Purnomo from Bawaslu, the supervisory body in Indonesia and especially in East Java. I will read it on the chat box. So in Indonesia, the significance of the people power were closely related with, first, how the voter gains information, not only the election itself, but also on the candidates. And the second, the number of the voter turnout. One of the issues that comes now were related with voter list, who become one of the indicator or variable related with the number of voter turns out. This is because the number of people who were registered will be compared with those who use their right to vote. Some issues that might need to be considered by the election organizer, especially related with the voter list, were about voters who were in detention, where they were still registered as voter at the place where they are registered as residents, so it will impact the logistic to the place where they want or have to exercise their right. So the first question is about voter list, and the second question is about the alternative voting, or Bang Adi Aman mentioned about spatial voting arrangement. The second were related with the effort of the organizer to register people who they know that the voter will not stay there anymore. The issues here is not it's still related to the voter list. The last were related with Bang Adi Aman already mentioned about spatial voting arrangement, which can be exercised in Indonesia because the detailed arrangement in the law, and this will impact the number of voter turnout for our election. I think I will stop there. The first one is about voter registration, and the second one is about alternative voting or spatial voting arrangement, like early voting, absentee voting, voting by mail. That is surging to accommodate vulnerable voter, as well as to make traffic at the polls lighter than usual on election days. In Sri Lanka, Chandani also mentioned that there was a plan to implement advanced voting for quarantine and was cancelled because of the objection from the political parties. If you have any thoughts, Bang Adi or Kosai or Chandani or Mbak Ninis. I think first from Bang Adi.
Yeah. Thank you, Dika, and thank you for the questions, participants. On the voter registration, I've already responded in the chat, so I will not repeat it. On Yulis Setiawati's question, actually, the economic recession can become an impetus by the incumbent government to insist on holding elections. We have seen the Korean government going through with the elections because they needed a mandate or to resolve the debates, the ongoing political debates at the beginning of the pandemic. They needed some clarity as to what the voters want, who the voters want to govern. The same with the Singaporean government. They decided to hold elections a year earlier. So instead of postponing, they're actually preponing the elections, also because they needed a strong mandate from the people. So the economic recession can actually become a motivation for holding elections. Now, this motivation needs to be married with the expectation of voters. And the expectations of voters, I've already mentioned, is the well-being of their health, first and foremost. And yes, voters do want to preserve their voting rights and exercise their voting rights. They want to make sure that there is legitimate government in their country at any given time. But first and foremost, it's their health they're concerned. So this is the main consideration that EMBs and policymakers should have in their minds. Now, about the use of electronic voting, Perludem and International IDEA have actually jointly created a guide for this. And if you take a look at the guide, 4 months is not going to be enough to implement all the steps that the guide recommends. Because first and foremost, the trust of voters in the machines is important. Important to make sure, and that takes time, and there are elaborate steps that needs to be taken, and you can have a look at the guide for that. I think that's it. Yeah, Dika.
Bang Adi, if you don't mind, you can respond the question or read that you already wrote on the chat box, because we have a audience on YouTube.
I see. Okay. Sure. About the there is a special voting arrangement actually available for this, and yes, it's administratively complicated, but it's been done in a number of jurisdictions, which is about absentee ballots. It's called absentee ballots, meaning that voters are able to vote outside their constituencies. Oftentimes, this requires the availability of the right ballots at the polling station. So it is logistically challenging for that, but and it requires sound planning, because you need to provide the ballots ahead of time, unless you are like South Korea or Australia, where ballots can be printed at the polling stations itself. So there are solutions, but they're of higher degree of difficulty.
Okay, thank you, Bang Adi. I will move to Chandani because Chandani mentioned that there was a plan to implement advanced voting for those who are quarantined and was cancelled because of the objection from the political parties. Chandani, yeah.
Yes, Dika. Actually, that in Sri Lanka, that many years that we were like advocating or the campaign for the advanced voting. I thought this is the opportunity for implement this time, because that high number of people are in outside overseas voters, as well as that those who are present, those who are in uh, uh, the hospitalized elderly people, they are actually PW people, they are losing their the franchise, because we don't have in Sri Lanka, we don't have any advanced voting, even though the election workers, domestic observers, or the civil society, they don't have any chance to vote but this time, actually, that election commission, they tried to implement, or they tried to implement with the advanced voting for the they already mentioned the date also, the 31st of the July, they allocated for the people who are under the quarantine to come and vote, or they are visiting their home to get their votes. But unfortunately, the political parties, they object for this proposal, even though they are election commission and other people that who need to strengthen democracy, they supported for the idea we don't have that legal provision. That's the main reason for the country. There are lack of legal provisions, so many of the things for implementing, not only the advanced voting, campaign finance, but I mentioned also. And we have seen in Korea, uh, they implement the advanced voting for that before the election. That is a very high impact, because that one of the things for the increase in the voter turnout also in Korea, the advanced voting system. But in Sri Lanka, we failed to do that. I hope that in future that may be like domestic observer group, civil society campaigning, advocating for the advanced voting. Yeah.
Yeah, and the second question is about from Syed Fahrul. How Sri Lankans experience saw the influence of digital network affecting voter participation.
Yes, as I mentioned, Sri Lanka elections that organized under the COVID pandemic, and therefore that we have to follow the health guidelines. It is legalized by the government. That from that, the political parties, they are allowed to do the campaign. The only the 300 people gathered, those normal campaign, and also that if the political party leader comes, that they increase to the 500 the numbers. With that we have seen a lot of digital media, lot of like social media the using for this like a campaign. Voter education also, the most of that we have seen that social media, a lot of campaigns going through the election commission also, they use that digital media many and the political parties, and also they use that campaign. It's like a high number of increase in the social media and all the digital tools for most of the electoral aspect activities. And the one of the things I would like to highlight, PAPRL is the one of the leading election observer groups. They use this first time the application for election observation and collecting the data. That is also I'd like to highlight.
All right, thank you, Chandani. And Kosai, if you have any perspective on the question.
I mean, like regarding the advanced voting. So I mean, like so far in Myanmar, we have inside constituency. So people who are inside the constituency, but not be able to go to the vote polling station and on the election day. So we call it inside constituency advanced voting. So like for them, we have a like a kind of 2-day periods to be able to vote, cast their vote. So I mean, like we are recommending the UEC to control the traffic of the voters on election day to prevent, to mitigate the risks of the COVID-19. What about we extend and the day of the advanced voting, so that we can reduce the number of things. This is still a discussion. I'm not sure how the Union Election Commissions will be taking that. And another one thing we have is, so at this point we have like our polling time is like 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. So we have the polling station size range from 300 to 3,000. So it's kind of like the polling station arrangement is like it's really like at some location it's 300, but at some locations it's up to 3,000. So we are concerned about even though the transmission and the effective people is stay very low, but we are very concerned about, because we have people just came back from Thailand. We have people just came back from Malaysia. So I mean, like, we have people who just came back from Thailand. So these, I'm not saying that they are the one who carrying it, but we still have a risk. So it is, I mean, a good to have to anticipate the risks we are going to have. So I mean, like, what about we increasing the number of the voting time, or is there any like a special designated zone of people who has got high fever or something, suspected person? So we are still discussing with the UEC at this point, but I mean, like, it's still ongoing process. Yeah.
And another thing about, is there any issues of disinformation in the context of voter information outreach and turnout?
Yeah. I mean, like, because of this, Myanmar has been known for in social media. In Myanmar, we are mainly talking about Facebook. Facebook is the main social platform we are using. We have now millions and millions of people are using Facebook, and then about 26 million are using Messenger as a messaging app. So Facebook is Facebook's Messenger is dominantly using in Myanmar. So we just been started to see some of the disinformation, especially the hate speech campaign. So regarding the Muslim community, something like that. So it's just been already there. So that's why we are also concerned about the voter suppressions. Like, there might be something like information, fake news about, at one polling stations we found one positive cases. So I mean, like, definitely there will not be the voter may not turn up on that particular polling station. So now we've been coordinating with the other civil society to come up with the risk mitigation strategy or risk management strategy. And then what is the question is that because of the information ecosystem in Myanmar is very, very like isolated. So I mean, it is very difficult for the voter to go and check where is the right information. So we've been encouraging UEC. UEC should be the one who is providing the right information, so that, I mean, once civil society found something is fake, so they have to refer, this is the right information, something like that. So I mean, this is a key, and we are still in going discussion with the UEC, with the other civil society.
All right, thank you, Kosai. Chandani, if you want to unmute your microphone, please, because I saw you write about social media use in Sri Lankan election.
Yes, and also that I would like to endorse that. Of course, I mentioned that if the country, like last election, I have seen that some of the best practices, like using like a less violence, and the same time, because that there's no physical contacts much. But the other hand, social media is using for the fake news and also the hate speech, and like from the Sri Lankan experience, I would like to share that if the country doesn't have proper law, proper regulations to mitigate that the social media or the campaign finance, it is very dangerous for allowing or the increasing that the social media for or the election process. That we need to that consider if there's no proper laws. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for
just one thing that in our campaign regulations, I mean, like one of the rates just Chanthony just mentioned is like, we don't have a specific regulations regarding the campaign on the social media. So which is like a kind of blind spot. So how to take, I mean, like monitor, or how to take, I mean, like we have a certain a measures we can report to the Union Election Commissions if something is happening on the ground, offline campaign, something like attacking or the personal incitement or something like that. But we do not have a regulations regarding the online campaign. But because of the COVID-19, there are some political parties starting using the social media, especially Facebook, as a campaign tool. So this is kind of like something is already started a lot. And the problem is like even not the regulations, but also the finance, so which is not very unclear. So what may be a problematic after the elections for us.
Yeah, and also that Dika, one of the recent election in Sri Lanka election, there's a before the election there are 2 days they declare for the cooling period. That means that not allowed to do any kind of campaign. That is, it is a legalized things, but we have seen that those cooling period, there are a lot of the campaign advertisement in the social media, in the Google platforms, include even in the election day. When we discuss with that the election commission and other people, that that in here we don't have that, especially the Facebook, we don't have the direct contacts. Then it take time to the close down the remove the campaign or the advertisement. It is already that if it is delayed for the action, is the message already gone. It's no point of like removing the advertisement. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chandani and Kosai. I want to continue the discussion on this to Ninis. I believe there is no strong regulation here in Indonesia regarding the campaign in social media. If you have any perspective on this.
Yeah, I agree with Kosai and Chandani that it's important to have strong regulation in social media. But the other important things is I refer to the international idea paper that they have strategic communication in the crisis situation for the electoral management bodies. The EMB should have a fast response if there is disinformation, misinformation, so they can catch up. So the disinformation or misinformation or hoax will not spread easily because the EMBs already take over the discourse in the social media. So EMBs, it is important for EMBs to have the communication strategy in the crisis situation. For example, what things should be communicated, the key message, who represent the EMBs. For example, they have coordination with the health institution, how to communicate with the people, and then with what kind of media. Of course, it is important to have communication in the social media, but there is also some people that still have conventional media. So we cannot leave the conventional media to communicate with the people, and then how often and when to communicate with the people, and how the EMBs are reaction to the critics and to the misinformation and disinformation. Because we have an example, for example, in 2019, a day after the EMBs set the election result in 21st of May, and then the next day there is a big riot in front of the Bawaslu office because there is a hoax, misinformation and disinformation that said why the election, the KPU having decide the election winner in the middle of the night. Some misinformation and disinformation like that. It happens in 2019. And then in the local election 2020, there is also big riot in the Regency of Indramayu, West Java, where when the supporter of the independent candidate came to the KPU office, and then there is a riot over there because there is misinformation about when the independent candidate can register themselves as the candidate. This information is not taken by the supporter well. They do not know that the election stages already postponed, so they think that when they come to the election commission office, they are not accepted to give their supporters. So, and then there is a riot over there. So because the EMBs are they have a limitation in I don't know what is the limitation, why it is they cannot give the information well to the supporters, but the impact the impact of disinformation or misinformation and also hoax in social media can bring the riot on the field if it do not managed well by the election management body. And also, Dika, I want to give a comment about the use of technology in this 2020 election. Actually, the Constitutional Court already said that technology is constitutional to be used in Indonesian election, but there is requirement before we choose the technology. For example, we have to have a deep research about the technology, that the technology, not only the EMBs that understand about the work of the tools of the technology, but the political parties, the candidate, and also the voter should also understand about how the technology works, so it can increase the trust of the people. And then we cannot, because it is very we need to be very careful to choose the technology, because the trust of the people is also important when we choose the technology to be used in the election. I think that's all, Dika.
I think we need a response for you about the alternative voting or spatial voting arrangement. Do you think that it is the time for us to consider seriously about the spatial voting arrangement, like mobile voting or mail voting or advanced voting?
I agree with you, because this pandemic situation is changed everything, but we cannot apply it in this election, 2020 election, because like I said before, the government regulation of law only regulate about the time of the election. The other regulation about the election still regulate to hold the election in the normal situation. So when we ask the EMBs to be more creative, to think out of the box, they don't have strong regulation, because when they work is not based on the law or the regulation, then there will be they will be sued in the end of the election. So I think it is time not only to change the law of the local election, but our general law of our general election, because now in Indonesia today there is a plan to have a revision of our general election law.
One more question,
okay.
that specifically on Indonesia, how to keep up with the voters turnout, because local election is not just amid pandemic, but also amid the threat of economic recession.
It is. The EMBs have to work harder to guarantee the voters that it is safe to participate in this election. Actually, I really hope that there is the EMBs have more communication with the voters in social media, because when we see the social media of our EMBs, sometimes it's only displaying pictures or a ceremonial event, but not more detailed information about the election. For example, they can inform the voters that when the officers come to our house to check our name in the voter list, they are provided by the health equipment, or they will when they come to the polling station, that there will be a hand sanitizer, thermometer, or and so on, and another information about that. Until now, I think there is still no information about that. So if in my position, we because we work in Perludem, so we know about all kind of the information. But how about the people that do not have access to that kind of information? So it is important to the EMBs also to reach those kind of group of people.
All right, thank you, Mbak Ninis. I want to go to Bang Adi, because we haven't heard your perspective about the issues of disinformation in the context of voter information, outreach, and turnout. Hello, Bang Adi, still there?
Okay. I was unmuting my mic. Yeah, it's the use of social media is a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, as Kwasai mentioned, for example, a vast majority of voters use Facebook and obtain their information through Facebook. And for other countries, it could be another social media platform. So it's double-edged, because on the one hand, that's the channel where the election management body, political parties, candidates alike need to use to communicate with the voters, especially in this time of pandemic. But it can also, as we know, can mislead and provide false information to the public. So in that case, I agree with, I think it was Ninis who said that the EMBs must work with anti-hoax community in detecting and also prosecuting those who provide misinformation and disinformation. And that's that's one of the effective ways of curbing this phenomenon. Yeah, and in this pandemic times, it's more necessary than before to do that. Thanks, Dika.
Right, thank you, Bang Adi. I think we are near to the end of the discussion, and I'm not going to conclude anything. However, to wrap up the discussion, I want to invite all of the speakers to give a brief closing remark for the discussion today. Start with Mbak Ninis, maybe, and Kosai, Chandani, and Bang Andi. For Ninis, floor is yours.
Yeah, what I think the EMBs should think more how to engage the voters in this election, especially women and people with disabilities, and also other marginalized group. Because yeah, when we talk about the election and democracy, one vote is valuable, include votes from those kind of group. So we still have 3 months to prepare the election. If I think the target of the KPU is 75% in the 2020 local election, so they need extra work to reach the target. And stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Ninis. Kosai, please.
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, definitely. I mean, the elections during the pandemic is a big, huge challenge. But I mean, for me, if we can use this challenge as an opportunity, like we have a very conventional and traditional legal framework and practices regarding the election. But I mean, using this pandemic situation as an opportunity, I mean, we can and change the way we engage I mean, like voters, the way we engage like election processes. I mean, that could be an opportunity if we see different way. I mean, that's something we would like to encourage the EMB, not only EMB, I mean, especially, I mean, like not necessarily EMB, political parties, and even civil society. We have to come to a more creative means of way to engage, to make sure that election is stay free and fair, and then I mean credible. I mean that's what I see this situation. That's what I encourage to the all election stakeholder to be more creative and positive. I mean. Tika? Yeah. And
All
then
right, thank you,
okay.
Jose. I'm sorry, are you still on giving remarks? Because my connection is very low and.
No, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Forgive me. I will give floor to Chandani.
Yes, Tika, and also that our friends, actually that democracy we cannot undermine in any kind of situation, even the COVID or any. And only thing is that we need to find the overcome that challenge, and that is like a good example from the South Korea. South Korea overcome the challenge. How they overcome that, we need to learn from those countries. And Sri Lanka also, there's some way that we overcome, and some of the opportunities I believe that we lost, like advanced voting, introducing the advanced voting, and also that working with coming with introducing the new laws and some of the things. And I think these are the things we need to consider. And also that the upcoming, there are major elections coming in Asia. One is in Myanmar, and and also that Indonesia Pilkada election is supposed to held in December. I think these are the, I believe, and I also that I would like to endorse that what Kosa said. These are the opportunities that COVID is the opportunity to break the old system, old traditional ways, to come out with a new system to strengthen the democracy. Thank you very much, and good luck, and also be safe. And we hope that we can work more for the democracy in the Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chandani. Bang Adi?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dika, and thank you once again for to Perludem and Respect Project, USAID Respect Project, for hosting this event, and for those who are tuning in to hear what we have to say, and for those who have posed questions. To close, I just want to reiterate what I said during my presentation about mitigating adverse impacts of COVID-19 in elections, particularly on vulnerable groups. So the first is ensure that the curve is flat while the elections are happening, and ensure that adequate voter information campaign is provided. And I think that's agreed by a number of speakers today. And three, wherever feasible, implement special voting arrangements, or SVAs, for vulnerable groups. Yeah, so these are the messages that I would like to convey to election management bodies and also policymakers out there. Thank you for the opportunity once again.
Well, it's a pleasure, Bang Adi. Thank you for giving us the presentation and the key points on the election amid pandemics, especially for the vulnerable groups. And everyone, the closing remarks from all of distinguished speakers marks the end of our discussion today. Thank you for being with us for more than 2 hours. And let's give a big round of appreciation for all the amazing speakers here. Bang Adi, Chandani, Kosai, Mbak Ninis, thank you for having provided us with enlightening point this afternoon. I would say that our discussion today is very fruitful, and we are very glad for the audience enthusiasm for talking this topic. Be sure to take our post-program survey. The link is on the chat box to let us know how we can improve our regional discussion series. Thank you very much once again to everyone. Stay safe and well. See you on another regional discussion coming up, and have a great day.